Our panel will answer any questions to industry members may have at this time. We ask that you go to the microphone stand here in the middle. We'll have a couple of mics roaming around. Guys, where are you with the mics? One over there. Where's our other guy? In the back. All right, real good. So we ask that you raise your hand to accommodate each person that may have a question. We ask that you limit your we're going to limit you to one question, and one question per participant. Any questions that we're not able to answer today, we'll answer on our website at the Tyndall Program Management Office webpage. So everyone will get an answer either now, and if we can't answer it now, we'll certainly answer it later. And when you do come to the microphone, I ask that you please say your name and what company you represent, followed by your question. If there is a panel member you'd like to hear from specifically, please let us know that too. So the mic is open. Does anybody have any questions for our panel? I know you're out there. I can hear you breathing. Any questions for our panel? Any of our panelists want to bring something up that we may not have covered that you might think be of interest to this august group we have assembled here? Going once.
I have a question I'd like to ask. Is this on?
It should be, yes, sir.
Okay. I have a question I'd like to ask. General Allen, can you talk us through why so many of our MILCONs are programmed in FY20?
Nope. One more time. There you go. All right. So you're coming to work for me again, right?
I don't know.
Ask your question again, but give me a little bit, as opposed to 19 or 26 or what?
As opposed to a range of, say, 20, 21, 22, 23.
Yeah. Okay. So not sure how it's going to play out on the Hill, frankly. But our concern is that there's going to be one bite at the apple to do this. And that bite of the apple will come in fiscal year 20. So you hear the Secretary on the Hill talking about a $2.6 billion MILCON requirement out here. That's $2.4 billion in the projects you saw, and another $200 million in planning and design. It was really important for us to provide some assurance on the Hill that we can get that obligated in fiscal year 20. And thanks to our partners at the Corps, thanks for the team down here doing all that work, we've given them that assurance. So now we start that conversation, right? We don't have $2.4 billion in a budget request right now. And we've been talking about, I'll say it this way, we have not been advocating for a supplemental because we don't do that, but we have been talking about the requirement to deliver an F-35 base and an installation of the future at Tyndall. We've been talking about that since the hurricane hit and talking about the cost that it would take to do that, refining those costs as we got better data. But right now, there is, you all who like to follow these things, you know there's a $9.2 billion unspecified wedge that went over with the FY20 budget request. It was part of actually the Army's MILCON request. 7.2 of that 9.2 is for border wall, and then $2 billion is for storm recovery for all of the services. Predominantly Marine Corps and Air Force, most affected by the recent hurricanes that we have, but there's some National Guard and Army Reserve in there as well. So you can do that math. That's $2 billion. It's unspecified, but that's not enough to do Tyndall. And then I think we're on our fourth attempt right now generated on the Hill for an actual supplemental appropriation. The first one happened just before the beginning of this calendar year in late December. But for the Air Force, those numbers in that supplemental, if it goes through as it's been proposed, and it was just reintroduced last week, $400 million for O&M in this fiscal year, or whenever that supplemental would get appropriated, and $700 million in MILCON. We can talk separately if you're interested about where those numbers come from. A lot of it has to do with assumptions made on the part of staff and members that are trying to help us in terms of how much we need and how much we get on contract. But you can kind of see where we are right now. getting 2.4 billion in fiscal year 20 is going to be a real challenge, I think. So our secretary is stating it very plainly, what we need, and I think it'll be exciting to see what happens in the next few weeks or months. Thank you for that question.
Always give your boss a softball.
Sir, you have a question?
Yes, I do. My name is Ephraim Rivers, retired civil engineer from the Air Force, working for the Johnson Controls Federal Systems team. And there was a question earlier regarding category management. We've heard through a couple of publications that that is coming, but as it was mentioned here today, we should be soon, hopefully, to jumping into that. Can you share a little bit more about category management and how we may potentially be used in these projects?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So each of the services is implementing category management according to the guidelines that have been given by the administration. Within category management, there are categories.
Sure.
I happen to be assigned as the category manager for facilities and infrastructure, basically. And so what we will do, the whole principle behind category management is looking at more efficient and effective ways to buy things. So that could include using a MATOC or some kind of a IDIQ contract where we say all of this work will be done under that contract because we've shown it's the most efficient, effective way to do it. I'll give you an example. All of the services are using GSA, the OASIS contract, to procure advisory and assistance services. That is a category management decision. So we will look for ways as we work with our partners with the Corps of Engineers to use those same principles as we acquire these programs. So if there are some mandatory sources that we can go to, if there are some sources that are most cost effective, a good example may be we give ceiling to the Corps to use our A&E contracts. That's a tool that already exists. It's an efficient, effective tool. So that is a good decision within the framework of category management. So we'll look for as many of those types of opportunities as we can.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Sir.
Scott Hartford with Stanley. Seems to me that regardless of what year these projects are programmed in, you're probably going to need to be prepared for incremental funding underneath that hood. So my question is, have you thought about, maybe the next steps, putting together a deliberate plan for incremental funding and, that corresponds to work placement?
Brent, do you want to take that?
Sure. So I think that really comes into how we structure the contracts, what sort of boilerplate language comes in, and I think there's ample. We haven't started doing that research yet, but that's an excellent point. I think that we need to reach out and look at how other similar programs have done it. Certainly this is a highly complex program with a lot of risk in it already. Compressing it into one fiscal year adds to that complexity, as kind of I discussed earlier, and there's the way we award these contracts will be structured and thoroughly vetted through the acquisition planning process.
Yeah, I'll add to that. If it's a supplemental, I don't think so. I mean, the funding will come. It'll be there. Where I get concerned about incremental funding is, frankly, in our regular base budget requests, right? So we think this year we've got a larger MILCON program in 20 than we've had in previous years, and we think potentially up to $500 million of it is going to be subject to incremental funding based on the WIP curves. That said, the money that's been requested for storm relief and that unspecified wedge I was telling you about, I believe that's going to get appropriated. The money will be there. So in the near term, I don't see it as vulnerable to incremental funding as much as, say, the large projects that are just in our base year that they're looking at, and they're looking at WIP curves, and they're making decisions about how much are we actually going to give you of what you asked for, if that makes sense. Over.
Scott, just one other point on that I'll add on is For the storm damage, as General Allen pointed out, it's not a question of incremental funding. It's a question of will we get the full amount of funding we need to rebuild Tyndall to the scope that we've envisioned. So it'll be you get this much, or you get this much, or you get this much, and depending on how much you get, what are the decisions that need to be made to scope the work to the amount of funding that we got. That's a more likely a possibility that we'd have to deal with.
Sir, your name and where you're from?
Great. Good morning. My name is Dave Robow. I'm the CEO, Chief Scientist with National Energy. I've spent many years in the Civil Engineering Directorate, Air Force Special Operations Command. And in that capacity, I saw oftentimes there'd be some conflicts between a UFC and a ETL, and we had a AFI that said one thing, and then we had an executive order that, called for something else. Is there an opportunity or a venue that's most appropriate to kind of have some of these discussions and kind of talk through some specific examples?
Well, the simple answer to that is the waiver authority for ETLs within the Air Force sits on his staff, works for him. So that makes it fairly easy. We'll build to the appropriate standard, and these guys can talk to that. But if there needs to be a waiver to a standard, should be a relatively straightforward thing for us to deal with. And of course, we'll work with our Corps of Engineers partners on that as well.
And there was some discussions about maybe changing the wind load requirements for reconstruction. I don't know if it.
Yeah, that's part of the ongoing discussion, and likely build to the higher wind load requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Craig Franklin with PAE. Reference the SCIF requirements on base. It's been our experience, we're a company that has ICD 705 certified construction surveillance teams. And our experience has been that's better to be a separate contract that's holding the prime contractor, accountable versus being a subcontract under the prime contractor. Do you have any views on how ICD 705 SCIF certification requirements are going to be structured in this?
I guess I would just say that in my experience at least, and I'll let my colleagues say if they feel differently, but I've seen numerous SCIFs constructed as part of a MILCON or other major construction project. I haven't really seen if it's a large-scale renovation or brand new construction, it makes more sense, in my experience, to be part of the project and not a separate contract to come in and do a SCIF. Now, certification happens afterwards, but you can construct the SCIF.
Yeah, this is I guess what I'm talking to is the ongoing surveillance of the construction that's required, on site all the time.
Yeah.
And that seems to be, for us, has always been better to be a separate contract.
Yeah, that's typically what we do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
James McConnell, Tool Time Building and Roofing. I'm a local contractor. My question is, I understand that the funding comes from multiple sources, but could you guys elaborate on the specific disapproval through Congress yesterday? And, what effect that'll have? And, what's the next step? Is there an appeal process? Do we, go back and re-engage them again? How does that work?
John, do you want to take that?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I know what disapproval you're referring to.
Well, the papers and the news said that there was a disapproval yesterday on some funding. The May 1st.
Right, okay.
May 1st deadline.
Yeah, all right, I can talk to that. So
Sorry about that.
Yeah, the May 1st deadline. So we've cash flowed north of $350 million at Tyndall alone, right out of our FY19 O&M funding. Money, not program money, that needed to be spent in order to make this installation safe and mission effective for those missions that have returned. Something similar going on at Offutt as a result of the hurricane, and then a lot of other O&M bills that have come due over the course of this fiscal year. We've got ourselves into about a $1.2 billion hole in O&M for this fiscal year, and I would think of it as we're having to triage what money we have left in order to get through the remainder of the fiscal year. We thought, frankly, back in November, that by now we would have a supplemental appropriation to give us the additional O&M that we needed, and this would not be, we would not be making this decision. So our comptroller, at the request of the secretary, basically came up with a triage plan. And it involves a lot of things. One of the things Mr. Henderson alluded to already, there's 61 O&M projects at other bases around the Air Force that are not going to get done until either next fiscal year when there's a new appropriation, or if we get some supplemental funding. Another one of those things was that we were going to stop new recovery activity here at Tyndall on the 1st of May, stop new recovery activity at Offutt on the 1st of July. You recall they're not quite as far down the road as Tyndall is in terms of their recovery. And then there's also impacts to flying. We'll be taking money, taking risk in weapon system sustainment, and taking money out of flying hour program later in the fiscal year as well. But really, this is all about making sure that the Air Force is delivering readiness for combatant commanders, and our O&M accounts are predominantly how we do that on a year in and year out basis. So that's what's going on. The work that's already been awarded here at Tyndall, and Colonel Hayden can talk to more of that, Colonel Laidlaw, that will continue until it's done. But until we have either a supplemental appropriation or some reprogrammed money or next year's appropriation, we're essentially on a pause to pick up the O&M rebuild at Tyndall. Does that help answer your question? Or?
Yes, it does. I just was, people are wondering, hey, what's the next step? How do we appeal this? Do we get another shot? Do we restructure and ask again? I mean, that's what they're asking.
I guess what I would say is it wasn't a congressional decision either. I should say that was the Air Force decision. As we were talking to Congress, saying, hey, this is where we are now. We've cash flowed as much as we can. We have to do some things in order to make sure that we don't have a situation like we did in 2013, where we were sequestered under the Budget Control Act, and we ended up parking airplanes, which was something that we do not want to do or can't do. So. This is part of the ongoing conversation that's, I think, driving some of the supplemental appropriation discussion. So I don't know that Congress has made, they made previous decisions, I would say, on supplemental because they were introduced on the floor in December and again in January, and then again more recently, and for a variety of reasons they didn't get voted out. But I understand it has been reintroduced here last week. And we'll see how that goes. I'm optimistic, guardedly optimistic, but optimistic. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If I could add just a couple examples to what General Allen said of what that means for us on Tyndall. So as the General alluded to, projects that are already on contract, those hundreds of millions of dollars that General Allen referred to, those continue. That's going to be things like mold remediation in our buildings, like all of us are dealing with here. Those are on contract. Those are going to continue. We've got multiple roof repair projects ongoing, and as anyone who lives in this community knows, every time a thunderstorm goes through here, the blue tarps blow away, and we got to do more interim fixes to the roofs. All those projects that are on contract and fully funded with the money that General Allen talked about, those are going to continue with little change until those contracts expire, whenever that may be, and it's different for different contracts. What we can't do, what the Secretary told us we can't do after the 1st of May, is any new projects. So we've got a list of 121 projects right now that we were planning on doing this year in FY19. This is the next tranche. If they're not on contract right now, we've got to sit on our hands. We've got to wait until we get funding and know how we're going to be able to pay for those. Those are going to be things like, for example, dorms. We've made references to dorms earlier. We had 11 dorms on the base prior to the storm. We were able to save 3 of them very quickly and open them back up in January. We're getting a 4th back partially later this month and then fully back next month. But the remainder of the dorms that weren't on contract for repairs, those are just going to have to sit. It'll be projects like that and other facilities, headquarters facilities around the base, support facilities around the base that they need repairs, and we hadn't got them on contract yet. Those are all on pause until we get money.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dan Petno with CHA Consulting. I appreciate the challenge of getting AE design firms on board quickly to get things started with the 12 zones. The question I have is regarding the AE DCS 13, it looks like you're leaning towards the 18 large businesses. Our firm also is part of the AE DCS on the small business side. We have a mentor-protege small business that is one of your eastern firms. I guess my question is, have you considered a blended approach where the large businesses could team with the small businesses within the AEDCS?
Absolutely. I'll say within those zones, some of those are smaller, and I kind of referred to that within a construction context. That also carries into the design phase context. There are other pools on the AE13 other than the worldwide. There's the East Coast Regional, which does have small businesses on it. In addition, we're looking at how to incentivize mentor-protege relationships and diversify the technical performance on each zone.
So the bottom line answer is we are really not just looking at the worldwide. We're looking at all of the tools under the AE13 DCS.
But would you consider a teaming of the various firms within the AEDCS? Obviously, these are some large programs. Maybe you have a capacity question within the small business, 9 businesses that are already here in the eastern region.
That's a question we'd have to talk to our contracting officers about, but we would certainly be willing to take that up with them.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Jeff Revis with the Morsky Group. We're a bonding company that supports a lot of the construction teams that work already at Tyndall and expect to in the future. Like the zone approach, wanted to see if you're going to be flexible with some of the bonding requirements over time so more small and mid-sized companies can participate in those zone competitions.
I'd say there's potential for that. I don't know that we've looked at that. We have not looked at that at this point. Some of the complexity that brings to mind is that the bonding requirements are there for a reason, and we don't necessarily want to let somebody overextend themselves. We'd have to look at that in a robust way that looks at all the variables.
I would add that our partners with the Corps of Engineers would have a say-so in that as well.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mark Papin with Battelle. Maybe another softball zoning question for Colonel Hayden. As I understand it, when you discussed the zoning process, that was really a geographical breakdown of the installation, an associated prime that would go in there and lead the effort for that location. And at the same time, I'm kind of trying to connect the dots on some of the needs that you have. You represented some of your high-value concepts that came out of the white papers, and one of those had to do with efficiencies associated with artificial intelligence and things like that. When I think about that, I think about the applications that could be applied across the installation, maybe applied towards saving energy and efficiencies. So is that something that would be captured in your infrastructure zone, or is that a different concept? Because really that would be applied across the board in many cases.
That's an excellent point. Our PMDI concept, we have that scoped out. It's not finalized, but in there we've got design standards, incorporation of innovation, and applying the integrating the design efforts in the sense that you apply. That bringing that integration also means not just boundary conditions between the zones, but also all the design standards and things that we'll look at bringing in for innovation and technology onto the campus.
Okay.
I think in particular, when we talk about the kind of the sensoring, infrastructure sensoring, again, we've got a workshop, kind of a sensor focus day that we'll have. Looks like it'll be early June now, and we will kind of talk through what that might look like in terms of Do you put that into each zone, or do we do that some other way? I don't know that we necessarily have that sorted out yet, but that certainly is something that we're thinking about
Great.
to try to figure out the best way to do it.
I'm assuming that'll be, so details on that'll be advertised as far as the June event?
That June event is probably, I'm not sure that we're going to have a bunch of industry in that. I think we've got to kind of get our kind of government side, sort of figure out internally how we think we're going to try to approach that first. So that's probably going to be primarily government folks on that. But certainly, I anticipate in the August Industry Day that we will be able to talk about what those discussions were and how we're moving forward in that particular area with AI and sensors.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Vanessa Willett with Acon General Contractors. I had a question about the small business set-aside contracts and/or if there are going to be sole sourcing opportunities for those companies who have those mechanisms for contracting for some of the smaller projects that are maybe pending right now or out there prior to the large 12-zone contracts coming out. Due to the fact that I would assume that most of these businesses in here, the majority are small businesses, and are going to be actually doing the work out on site. Just kind of a general question of, are those going to be opportunities coming up in the near future prior to those contracts, or will everything be under the slide mechanism?
No, that's an excellent question. Thank you. The way we've been doing contracting so far has been an expedient method, primarily through the AFCAP vehicle. And we've done several smaller actions through the local contracting shop, as well as several other smaller actions through the Corps of Engineers out of Mobile District. We've been transitioning out of AFCAP, and at a future state, we will be making 100% of those decisions through the acquisition planning process, which will integrate what we can get to small business, integrating all of the requirements, large requirements, small requirements. So kind of as we transition from the current state to that future state, there's decisions that we're making because more along the lines of who has capacity to get contracts on the street and do so. They're not as deliberate yet as I would like them to be, but we're working hard to get that acquisition planning in place. I'd also call your attention to part of my slides I didn't really talk to a lot, which was the FSRM programs in FY19, the remaining programs, which very possibly will slide 100% into FY20. Those facility repairs, much of the campus, we were able to save 50% of the facilities. And a lot of those, almost all of those, are within zones. Those will be prime targets through the acquisition planning process to give to small businesses and other set-asides, whether it's through an existing MATOC pool or a new MATOC pool that we put into place.
Hi, Andrea Gibson with Brick Procurement. For the white papers and the results that you shared, the evaluation assessments, will the PMO be contacting the providers of the white papers and give them feedback on their submission, and if there's any, next steps?
Honestly, I don't know that we have specifically thought that far, to be perfectly blunt with you. We've been sprinting really hard with a lot of things, but thank you for that suggestion, and let me take that for consideration and figure out what makes sense in terms of reaching back out to individual providers, for lack of a better word. Certainly the slides that I briefed, those are going to be made available to everybody, so you'll have that information. But let me take that and figure out what might make sense to do for that.
Okay, and if I could just say one more thing on that, as firms who have submitted white papers, I know that when we're submitting our white paper, it's for service that we provide or a concept that we can deliver that would make use and be valuable here at Tyndall. So your feedback is helpful for us, and then also helps us understand, is there something else that we can provide or any other discussions to have based on the information we presented. So
thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Are there any other questions for the panel?
For distributed power generation and microgrids.
Hey, your name again, sir? I'm sorry.
Scott Jarvis with RS&H.
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Just checking to see if you know. Yeah.
Scott Hartford with Stanley. So for all of that, it seems like you need to do it right, you need to master plan it, obviously. And perhaps a good way to execute it is an EUL, a master EUL with a power purchase agreement embedded within. So 2 questions. Number 1, has the master planning effort done any of that? And for the second question, are you thinking in that direction in terms of execution strategy?
I don't know that the master plan specifically looked at
UL
those.
opportunities?
No, I don't think they have, but that's something that I think is a very, there's good opportunity for some sort of P3, P4 kind of agreement situated around energy resiliency as a whole. And that's another area that we are just kind of starting to look at and get our arms around to figure out, again, what makes the best sense for that. We also have to be aware that that the electric and natural gas is privatized already. So whatever kind of agreement we pursue, we would have to work that in conjunction with, I think it's Gulf Power. But certainly that is something that we are definitely going to look at how we might do something like that. I think it makes a lot of sense.
I'm keeping score. That was 2 times 2 questions, Scotty.
I know, you owe us a beverage.
My name is also Scott Jarvis from RS&H.
Are you sure?
Today. So my second question is related to commissioning and looking at the program obviously from a programmatic perspective and whether or not you've considered laying in and incorporating across the program commissioning. And just something that I would highly recommend you to consider as you're bringing on a lot of new facilities and even renovating some of these other ones. You're going to need some recommissioning, especially with the current, obviously the climate down here. That's something that's almost always an afterthought. And it's just something I think that will deliver you more efficient products and reduce your O&M costs in the long term if you incorporate that into your contracting acquisition strategy.
Got that. Yes, sir, that's absolutely part of what we're getting at within the acquisition strategy. Red zone, finishing the construction contracts is always a challenge. The way we've treated commissioning thus far in this has been somewhat conceptual, but we are tracking that as a requirement within the acquisition planning construct.
And this will be our last question.
Michelle Sipe with Lutron Electronics. Just wondering if you're also working with Fort Benning as they are looking to do an installation of the future with the Army. If you're leveraging some of the industry days, they have an upcoming one on May 23rd in Arlington. And then also wanted to see if you're leveraging the controlled system test beds that both the Army and the Navy are standing up when it comes to the cybersecurity requirements for your installation.
So we've not specifically worked with Fort Benning, but we are aware and will have a number of folks participating in the Army's Base of the Future, sorry if that's not the exact name, but the 23rd May event up in Arlington. We will be attending that and looking for what we can bring to bear here. And what was the other part of your question? Sorry. I just lost my train of thought.
The controlled system test beds that both the Army and the Navy are standing up.
Right. So we have talked with some OSD level folks in terms of the censoring and cybersecurity aspects, and we will have them participating in our sensor, kind of government-focused sensor fusion day. We are, and so I will make a note to ask them about the Army and the Navy test beds. Thank you.
I highly recommend Daryl Hagley at OSD.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks for your questions. General Melanson, would you like to make some remarks?
I would love to.
I knew you would.
I'd love to make some remarks. So, all right, hold on. Got to be smarter than the equipment. So, thank you everybody for coming out today. Please ensure, if you have not yet already done so, you will have had a form like this on your chair. If you would please fill that out so that we know that you were here, and as we are doing outreach in the future, we'll be able to contact you. In addition, you should have gotten a little business card like this that's got on the back of it our website and also a generic email that you can send for the PMO. You can, if you would please, return those attendance slips to one of the lieutenants that are around the room here. If you can't find one of them, probably as you entered with the registration table out there, we can collect those, but try to give it to one of the lieutenants. I want to thank Mr. Neubauer for being here today from the Bay Defense Alliance. You've assisted us in putting this day together and really getting out our message. We thank Senator Rubio for his support of video earlier today. We know that our Florida congressmen are really supporting us, and we're greatly appreciative of that. I want to thank Mr. Henderson, Honorable Mr. Henderson, Mr. Edwards, and General Allen for joining us as we work to tell our Tyndall rebuild story with industry. Also, Colonel Laidlaw, I think Brent understated it. He has absolutely been the champion and the warrior for this base, so appreciate you being here. And also Colonel Hayden, honestly, I don't know how he has the stamina. He's like the energy bunny on steroids. I'm waiting for him to one day just walk in and boom, fall asleep on his desk just from sheer exhaustion. It's definitely, it is a full sprint here, so. I also want to thank the Society of American Military Engineers for sponsoring our coffee today. All of you who got your caffeine fix, please thank a SAME member for that. And we also appreciate the dedication and the caring of the Bay County community. It is a very special relationship that Tyndall and the surrounding area have. And finally, I want to thank all of you from industry who have taken time out of what I'm sure is very busy schedules for you to come here and join us. Finally, we want to thank Florida State University for the beautiful facility, absolutely amazing view out of the back here, and the 325th Fighter Wing, and especially our dedicated Tyndall PMO staff and the sharp lieutenants that have really done so much in being workhorses for us. We would not have been able to pull it off without them. And we appreciate everybody joining us as we work together to build Tyndall Air Force Base as the base of the future. Thanks so much.
This concludes our Industry Day formal activities. Thanks for joining us today.